and then Superior Court. So what I did was said, look, in a perfect world, if we could wipe out a lot of the things that are congesting the municipal and district courts, what would those be? And we all know this. You're in Ward 4. You are fully familiar in Back Bay, Fenway, and the South End. Mental health issues, substance use disorder, food and housing insecurity are the overwhelming number of things that are the root causes to a lot of the problems for many of the non-violent, non-serious crimes we see in our municipal and district courts. Not all of them, but many of them. And so in the first instance, I considered, what if we got these people treatment and services, of course, made them stop the trespassing, made them stop, you know, engaging in the nuisance behavior that was occurring. I'm not talking about violent crimes, but let's get these people help, and then hopefully they don't have to touch our criminal legal system again. Because what we were seeing with some of those low-level crimes are a high recidivism rate. So once I became the DA, I actually memorialized, not on my campaign website, but in a memo that was over 60 pages long and annotated, my list of 15. And part of why I did that, guys, is I wanted to allocate my limited resources. I only have a budget of about $24 million a year to violent and serious crimes. And last night I was up most of the night because there was a shooting on Wambach Street in Boston. We have seen, unfortunately, an uptick. That young man is alive but clinging to life right now. We've seen an uptick in non-violent shootings, non-fatal shootings, which of course are just the fact that somebody missed. They were trying to kill that person and were not successful. But why I'm looking at these 15 crimes is there are certain communities that have too many interactions with law enforcement, all of which can escalate in a moment. And if we look at a George Floyd, who essentially had tendered a counterfeit $20 bill, not a violent crime, but absolutely he could have been charged with something. But in 8 minutes and 46 seconds, he was tried, convicted, sentenced, and executed for a misdemeanor. And that's not the way that it works. So I issued my memo. One of the other things I've done, which is really at the center of a lot of what we're seeing, is I created the first in the nation discharge integrity team. So whenever the police discharge their weapons or utilize a chokehold or a taser, or even engage in physical behavior that results in harm without a gun, I have a group of 4 individuals that are not in my office. I have a retired Superior Court judge, a criminal defense lawyer, a head of a community health center, and an active member of law enforcement. And I'm the 5th member of the discharge integrity team. We meet out of my office once a month, and we are presented all the evidence on officer-involved shootings. We direct and control those. And why I did this, guys, is a lot of the tension between certain communities and law enforcement is based on the fact that they don't believe that if in 95% of the cases, the DAs and law enforcement are walking in hand, lockstep together to prosecute a case, our most reliable witnesses are usually members of the police department. The community doesn't believe that if in 95% of my cases, they're my friend and witness, that I'm going to be able to take that hat off and be objective and fair if one of them discharges their weapon and harms a civilian. So what's great for me is I'm new to the office. I don't know anyone in the Boston Police Department. I came as a federal prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I created the discharge integrity team. In 2019, we had 4 officer-involved shootings that were all fatal. And this year we've had several, including one last night. An officer discharged his firearm last night that will be, luckily he didn't strike anyone, but it is still a discharge, and we will be looking into that. So my memo is one thing, the discharge integrity team is another. We've done something called PUSH, the Project for Unsolved Suffolk Homicides. When I took office, there were over 1,367 unsolved homicides in Suffolk County. One of the things that was heart-wrenching as a candidate was shaking people's hand, talking about my ideas for the office, and being told my loved one was murdered 3, 7, 9, 11 years ago, and no one from your office has called me since the night he was murdered. We have done a much better job at mobilizing the entire office to assist with an internal review of these cases to see whether there's any new information, any new science or opportunities, fresh eyes on these over 1,000 cases, so that we can ask the Boston Police Detectives homicide unit that handles unsolved homicides to really start engaging. I am proud that the mayor and the commissioner doubled the size of the unsolved homicide unit. As a result, I hope, of us talking quite a bit during the campaign about all those unsolved homicides. We made community engagement. I inherited an office with one community engagement person that was exceptional. She was the entire community engagement unit. We now have multiple people in that unit. We are engaging and having, hundreds of touches with all the different parts of Suffolk County and all the distinct neighborhoods. So we have a rich and diverse group of individuals in that Community Engagement Bureau. And then the last thing I will mention is that Victim Witness Advocate, the Victim Witness Advocate unit is now run by a licensed independent clinical social worker who is involved in much of the things that I'm doing, so that all of our practices are trauma informed. Last night there was a shooting, I said, and we were up for most of the evening. An 8-year-old witnessed the shooting. That 8-year-old, we made clear was not going to be interviewed by the Boston police. We wanted the child to have what's called a sane interview. We wanted to make sure that we were putting this child in front of individuals that were trained appropriately with respect to young children and trauma. And so not that the police aren't professionals, but I'm talking about with small children, the interrogation is entirely different than if it was with a Senator Brownsberger, right? Who can hold his own and understands this and is a lawyer and has done this before, as opposed to an 8-year-old that just witnessed one of their loved ones being shot multiple times and then shot in the head. So we are working really hard to make sure that we are assisting victims, no matter whether they come, pristine, or whether they themselves have touched the system in previous encounters. And we are being really deliberate and thoughtful. The last thing I'll say is, with COVID-19, we did opt to put my entire staff on work share and furlough a few days, so that we could save up a little bit of money and not have to lay off any of my 350 approximate employees. So we are trying to be frugal in that way as well. And we are one of the only DA's offices. About a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, we had a sitting grand jury. It was Suffolk County and Chicago, I think, were the two most early into COVID that actually got a sitting grand jury. And we're trying to get another one up, because remember, every time you see Commissioner Gross on the news or me next to him, that's because someone was murdered or shot. Crime has not stopped as a result of this global pandemic. And even though the courts are closed and only open to emergencies, we've arraigned individuals charged with homicides, and we're trying to rapidly indict a lot of gun cases when we get our grand jury up. So that is what I will say to you, and I can answer any questions about that or anything else in Suffolk County, outside of Suffolk County, in the news, happening anywhere. I'd love to help answer questions.
Awesome, thank you so much. If folks can put questions in that they have in the chat, that will probably help this run more smoothly, so we're not kind of figuring out who's talking at any given time. So feel free to fire away with any questions. I see Margaret.
First, hi, and I wanted to say, could not be more proud of you and your courage. You know, as a woman or woman of color in this position, what you have put up with and stood up for has been remarkable. And many of us have been watching you, and you have been incredible. And whatever any of us can do to support you, reach out. Some of the things you're saying about what's happened to you, we should be saying for you and about you. And I'm going to reach out to you too, because I'm now the chair of the Boston Human Rights Commission.
Yes.
All right. And I want to come and see you and see how we can sort of work together. But
Yep.
you know, you have done more than any of us could ever hope for. I mean, I so admire what you've done. And when I grow up, I want to be like you. So,
Yeah, right.
but I'll reach out. We'll
Excellent.
talk. Okay.
Yes. And hearing about the Human Rights Commission, one of the things that we announced about 3 weeks ago was there's 3 locations in the United States that have been selected through DA's offices to have a Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission, only with respect to the criminal legal system.
Right.
So there are, I think Senator Representative Santiago, I think it's Senator Collins and Representative Miranda that proposed some legislation about a statewide Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission. I'm going to hopefully be receiving some funding just for Boston, unfortunately, for Chelsea Winthrop and Revere. And 2 of the things that we had discussed potentially starting with were busing and the Charles Stewart murders. And so we are going to be reaching out to a lot of people about what this might look like. Obviously, places like Rwanda, South Africa, Germany, I think Canada with indigenous people has had a genocide there, Guatemala, and then Virginia and North Carolina within the United States have all tried to do this. And there have been a few little upstarts around Boston looking at certain issues. So we have a lot of work to do before we get started, but I'm really proud that we were one of 3 pilot locations selected: San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Boston.
Great. I look forward to working with you.
Excellent.
So I had to unmute myself. I see a good question from Julia asking about what's happening to the jail population in Suffolk County during the pandemic. Wondering if the number of incarcerated individuals has been going down.
Yes. So Julia, the wonderful public defenders and MACDL, Mass Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, filed something in our state Supreme Court, essentially right after the governor announced that, there was a state of emergency due to COVID-19. They saw that in the United States at one point, the top 10 hotspots in the United States of where there were COVID outbreaks, 8 of them were carceral facilities. And number 1 and number 2 were both, I think, in Ohio somewhere. Unfortunately, I think for us, Holyoke, the veterans VA facility in Holyoke was in the 30s, which we are, is awful as well. But what they did, Julia, was they filed a lawsuit saying pretrial detainees and all prisoners are essentially sent to a place where you can't do the 2 things we were instructed to do regarding COVID. You can't socially distance, and you can't, be highly sanitized or clean, right? You can't wash your hands. And I'm not being vulgar, but if any of you have ever been to a jail or a prison, it is a few feet by a few feet. It's either 1, 2, and at some places up to 6, 7, or 8 people in a room. And there is an open toilet without a toilet seat that is shared by all. And when you sleep, you can't be the requisite, 6 feet away from each other. And certainly there was at a point where you couldn't have more than 10 people in one place at a time. So when they were eating, when they were in the having recreation and doing other things, they were not complying with the very requirements that our state and Commonwealth had. So what our SJC did was they looked at the pretrial detainees, which overwhelmingly, guys, those people go to the Suffolk County House of Corrections, which Sheriff Tompkins, who is elected for 6 years, is responsible for. Then there were other inquiries regarding the post-conviction sentenced population, which overwhelmingly, not all, but many, 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 go to the Department of Corrections, which is state-run, and Secretary Turco runs that from Governor Baker's, cabinet. And so we have seen really good numbers with respect to pretrial detainees, upwards of, almost, I'd say, high 20% decrease, maybe even into the 30% decrease in the population of pretrial detainees, which, guys, there's another word for them, innocent people, right? Yes, we have charged them. Yes, we have maybe moved for dangerousness or asked for bail, but that is that's this big in a 10-foot ladder regarding the burden that I have as the DA in order to prove if it's a felony case that we're going to try in Superior Court, I have to bring that to a grand jury and then a trial jury. So I have multiple hurdles to prove. And so the court said for pretrial detainees, we got to get these people out of here as soon as possible. We have to really think quickly and be nimble and move. And we did a good job at that. The numbers are much lower for the post-conviction sentenced population. And the SJC basically said, that's out of our purview. Governor Baker has the ability to pardon or commute a sentence or engage, his secretariat regarding parole or medical parole or other things like that. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I met you in my office, right, about licenses, right?
Yes.
Once you said it, I'm like, that's the license lady. I remember her.
Yeah, I'm the license lady. That's what everybody knows me
I
as.
love it.
Good to see you again.
You as well.
So one quick amusing question before I then go to the two other policy questions I saw from Carol, who notes, seconding Margaret's comments on your deeply inspiring leadership. Probably the most unimportant question tonight, but what's on your t-shirt?
Oh, Hamilton. Just like my country, I'm young, scrappy, and hungry. And we've watched Hamilton on Disney Plus probably 400 times. I think you guys know I have a 16-year-old daughter who's like too cool to watch it with us, but an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old niece that I'm the guardian of, as a result of some siblings that have struggled with many of the things that are on my list of 15 and mental health issues and substance use. So I'm a big Hamilton fan. That's what it says.
That's fun. So a question from Andrea Rasmussen asking about when you had noted a kind of an uptick in violent crime and recently, of possible reasons for that recently.
So that's a really good question. There are certainly parts of that where, there are violent individuals that even in a global pandemic are going to continue to be violent. But I think it's a bigger issue. When I heard Will talk about healthcare, when we look at right now where we are, forget about George Floyd. Let's go back to March 10th with COVID-19 and recognizing that we had high levels of unemployment, evictions and foreclosures. We had schools shutting down. So even if you are working, myself, I'm homeschooling 3 children, right? And even in my home, my daughter is at Buckingham, Brown and Nichols. One of my nieces is in Boston Public Schools and the other niece is in Cambridge Public Schools. And the disparities between those 3, first grade, 5th grade, 10th grade, BB&N, Nathan Hale, and the Baldwin School in Cambridge, the disparities are huge between each of those systems, how many times they're meeting. So we have parents that are now homeschooling. Many of the communities where the violence is happening are essential workers, the individuals that are most often, if we look at, there was a shooting a couple months ago, I call it the Bromley Heath. Many of the individuals that live there are upstanding, hardworking people, and they're just a small group that engaged in this behavior. But remember, it's their homeschooling, they're essential workers. Many of those communities have English as a second language, so they're homeschooling and English as a second language, or if they're on an IEP. All of these things, guys, are pressures for anyone. And one of the things we have to remember is I was even very naive and ignorant about when I remember some of the people we arrested for some very violent crimes. They have jobs, right? I know in our mind, we might be thinking that this is a criminal mastermind that does nothing but commit crimes. Are there people like that on the planet? Yes. But many of the individuals, have a job as well, or children, or are, not just the one horrible thing that they might be doing when my office comes into contact with them. So there's a lot of pressures, I think, that are happening with COVID-19 that we're exposing. Chelsea, for example, out of the 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, Chelsea is #1 with respect to COVID positives, 67% Latinx, very high immigration population. And remember, one of the things I did very early in my tenure was I was very fortunate to be with DA Marion Ryan in Middlesex County. We sued ICE and stopped them. We were the first place in the country that ICE could no longer come into courthouses and civilly arrest people in a courthouse for something they weren't there for. And churches, schools, as well as courthouses are places where people, and hospitals, should be able to go and be honest with what they are doing. So we look at all of these exacerbating factors. There are people in Chelsea that don't want to go and test positive. They're afraid that they're going to be either deported or evicted and kicked out of their housing situation. So I think there's stressors that are involving that. And then add on to that, unfortunately now, even more tension between law enforcement and certain communities as a result of what we're seeing happening around the country. So we have a lot of work we need to do.
Thank you. And then I see a question from Harold Brogan asking if there's been any progress on mitigating the stigma associated with having a Corey.
So one great thing, and maybe Senator Brownsberger can talk about this, he was the, as you all know, the one of the, or if not the key architect in our crime bill from 2018. There's much more work that's being done right now, but there's a lot of movement with young people now about expungement. Mm-hmm. And so UTEC, which is a really great program, I think, Senator, it's out in Lowell, mm-hmm. As well as ROCA, which is right here in Suffolk County in Boston. They have a really vibrant young community that are activists, right, themselves as young people, juveniles, many of them all the way up until emerging adults and beyond, that are really taking control of some of the issues that older of us have been championing for a while. So I think with this most recent sort of storm, right? This perfect storm of all of these things happening and people really paying attention to this, we are seeing that there's much more openness to the potential of saying, you know what, that was 5 years ago, or that was 7 years ago, which are, or 3 and 7 now are the numbers, thanks to Senator Brownsberger. But we're looking at maybe expanding some of the things that we could expunge for, and making the process much easier for people, because it is still difficult here in Massachusetts to do it. It should be much, much, much easier. So yeah, I'm hopeful that things are going to get better about sealing and expunging, which are two very different things.
So there's sealing, expunging, and then also expunging and sealing the federal records. Yep. And so I think the one that we made the least progress on, although we made some progress in the criminal justice reform, is the expunging of our local records. And we actually have some improvements on that in our policing bill. They're not directly related, but if we can hold on to those, that'll be a little item of progress.
Excellent.
Great. And I think we have time for one more question, if anybody wants a final question in. Going once for the final question.
Oh, yes. Can I explain the rationale behind the lawsuit by other DAs?
Oh, yeah.
So very quickly, right? And I will not bury the lead. This is the same thing as if Governor Cuomo interrupted Governor Baker during his State of the State address, or if Mayor Curtatone shoved Mayor Walsh out of the way and said, I have a couple things I want to say about the city of Boston as the mayor of Somerville. We have fiefdoms, basically, right? And DAs and the AG, the Attorney General, Maura Healey, we are pretty autonomous. We report to the voters, and you get 4 years to kind of get at us every time. So it was really outrageous to me that in this case, which the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts decided that this Mattis and Watt are the two defendants, they upheld their first-degree murder convictions, but said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to remand it down to Superior Court so that there can be an evidentiary hearing about brain development. So really quickly, Watt is 17 years old in 355 days. Mattis is 18 years old in like 8 months. They are charged on a joint venture theory, but Watt, the 17-year-old, is the one that pulls the gun out and kills Mr. Blake. Mattis is no angel. He handed him the gun, but there was the affirmative couple more steps where Watt himself killed Blake. Watt is going to be eligible for parole in 15 years, and he is the one that pulled the trigger. Now, he might never get out because the parole board might decide to say, no, 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 every time he comes, but at least there is a glimmer of hope for Watt. But there is less than 8 months difference between these two people, and Mattis, who was not an angel, but did not pull the trigger, will never get out of jail. He has natural life without the possibility of parole. Now, my office, it wasn't me, I wasn't the DA at the time, prosecuted Watt and Mattis, got first-degree murder convictions. When it was appealed, we, under my administration, affirmed those. We did not say, let's overturn those first degrees. We were supportive of the Blake family, who are the victims here. But what we did was said, no problem, we'll handle this basic evidentiary hearing in a Superior Court. And 4 of my peers, without making a phone call to say, hey, by the way, we're going to do this, we just want to make sure our voices are heard, just filed a motion to intervene. And there are mechanisms where people can be heard in front of our appellate courts. They're called amicus briefs, right? So this happens all the time, but it was a very unusual thing. And the only thing I'll add is the case that raised the age is called Diachenko, and it came out of Suffolk County 7 years ago when Dan Conley was the DA, and none of them, those 4 peers of mine were all DAs, none of them intervened under Dan Connolly, but now that I have this and the SJC wants it, they intervened under me. So that was an appeal that I personally pulled out my old hands from when I was clerk on the Mass Appeals Court, and that was my exact language, because I said, no, I have this, don't worry about it. And so the SJC denied both of their motions, and we are going to move forward with this hearing. But ultimately, guys, it's not even my decision. I just have to create a record. It goes up to our Supreme Judicial Court, and they get to decide on their own with all the amicus briefs. And all we're fighting for is the glimmer of hope for somebody like a Mattis, and it might never come. And I might actually, after, I won't be the DA in hopefully 45 years if he gets out, but I'll be retired and happy. But I could potentially oppose his parole, or the DA could oppose, but it's just the glimmer of hope to go before a parole board. That's what it was about. Thank you.
I'll say thank you so much for joining us. I remember that was our July meeting back in 2018 when we voted to endorse you for the race that year. And it's exciting to see all of the work that you've been able to do so far. And thank you for spending some time with us.
I'm very grateful. And I'm going to let you guys deal with your senatorial stuff now. So I'm going to back out. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you. Before we have the Senate candidates up, we did have also a Registrar of Probate candidates and one of the other contested races on the ballot. I did see Felix Arroyo Sr. In the participants list. If you're kind of welcome, if you want to talk for, if you can talk for 5 minutes, feel free to unmute yourself. Don't.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. I'm sorry. My name is Felix Arroyo, and I'm running for re-election as your Suffolk County Register of Probate and Family Court. I would like to begin by thanking you for taking the time to hear from me tonight. I have a long history of public service and of fighting for justice and equity. Wherever it was at the first Latino of the Boston School Committee, first Latino elected to the Boston City Council, first Latino ever elected as a county-wide office in Massachusetts, or as the first person of color elected as Register of Probate in Massachusetts, I have always been led by my values. As your Register of Probate, I took on the monumental task of ensuring that the registry reflects the diversity of Suffolk County. On my first day in office, the registry staff of 35 was about 20% people of color and can only speak with registry users in English and one person in Spanish. Now the registry is 65% of color, speaks English, Spanish, Haitian Creole, Cape Verdean Creole, and Vietnamese. Additionally, there are 8 registry employees with a supervisory role. Of those 8, 7 of them are women of color. Of these, the 2 highest ranking employees, the first assistant register, who is a Black woman, and the assistant register, which is a Latina. Prior to my time at the Registry of Probate, there was never been a non-white first assistant register or assistant register. I appointed all of these employees. The registry is the administrative branch.
You can't take that stuff. Oh, shoot. No, Dana.
Okay. All right, the registry is the administrative arm of the family court. We average about 15,000 cases a year dealing with issues such as will and testaments, divorce, adoption, name change, protective orders, custody, guardianship, and many other court-related issues, family-related issues. The vast majority of the users of the registry cannot afford a lawyer. And under my leadership, we have made it so that the process is as user-friendly as possible, including a lawyer of the day, a volunteer lawyer of the day. Customer service and efficiency is our top priority. The registry is an administrative office, and with my administrative experience as the director of the Office of Transitional Service, director of the City of Boston Office of Personnel, and of the executive director of various community-based organizations, I have been able to translate experience into real and tangible changes at the registry. I'm asking for your support and for your vote on Tuesday, September 1st, so that I can continue my life work of fighting for justice and equity for our people and continue the reforms we have put in place in the registry. It has been my honor to serve as your Registry of Probate and hope to have your support so that I can continue to serve you in that role. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. If we have, I can take 1 or 2 questions if people have them. I'll say go at once.
If there are no questions, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Once again, but yeah, thank you again so much for joining us. And then is Kerby Robeson on here? I do not see him.
Yes, I am.
You're here. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you can have 5 minutes as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. And I want to say thank you to the Ward Committee, Ward 4 Committee for allowing me this time to address the Ward 4 on my candidacy for Suffolk Registry of Probate. Again, the name is Kerby Robeson. You can see it on my back there. I am a father of 3 children, 3 boys, 20, 16, and 12. I work a lot at home and I work in the office. I work in the courts as well. I've been a lawyer for 27 years. During the 27 years, I've been in the probate court. My first job was Assistant Regional Counsel for the Department of Social Services at that time. Now it's Department of Children and Family Services. My job included adoption, guardianship, and all kinds of other probate-related matters. As you all know, the probate registrar is mainly the administrator of the probate and family court that deals with 5 cases involving divorce, custody, parenting rights, visits with grandparents, paternity, conservatorship, every issue, family issue that somebody can encounter. That is to say that this is a court, probate and family court, and the registry has the capacity to affect people's lives in the most profound ways. I don't see the probate registry as just a customer service or an administrative position. I believe in this day and age that this probate registry can be used as a dynamic office that can address issues and really attack the wealth gap. $8 in recover. Now, this is the time for folks to think about progress. We need to register within 27 years that can take this office and transform it from a static politician run office to a competent lawyer, 27 years of experience with an eye to the future. I want to use the office to really empower the community and to address the wealth gap that we are all talking about today. Now, this is no longer the time to be sad. If I know Ward 4 has a lot of progressive people in it, I urge you to be more, to look into progress as opposed to yesterday or things that have been there before, but with an eye to the future. And I'm the one with the experience that can take this office into the 21st century, meaning that I will cultural and training, outreach and education of the community to address issues of wealth, which a lot of people have to know about. I have practiced it. I know how to give the community the benefit of my experience so they can transfer wealth from the parents to the children, so at least we have a chance to overcome this huge wealth gap and get people to be moving in the direction of addressing the inequality that we have regularly. Now, I, as a lawyer, have gone to what they call clinical training. I want to use this office to facilitate legal representation for free to some of the cases involving child support, parenting time, which is very essential and custody to strengthen the family. We have issues with people in court and they are so emotional that they cannot address the child support issues that they face every day. These are issues that affect people's life, the unity between the parents. So we, myself, as a probate registrar, I will bring to this office this dynamism that the office needs. Not only will I address what's happening inside the court, inside the registry, but I will address the issues, the lack of knowledge in the community. And I will be the people's registrar. I want you to know that
Thank you so much for having.
Thank you.
But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for your gracious invitation, and I need your help on September 1st.
Great, and I want to welcome up. I saw Senator Ed Markey. Welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, great. So what we're doing for both of you guys, kind of a 5-minute opening pitch, and then we'll have like up to 15 minutes for questions if people have them.
Thank you, Jonathan, so much. Thank you to Ward 4. You guys are democracy in action. Just an incredibly active ward and at the cutting edge of every issue. I'm down here in Washington right now. We're having an enormous battle, obviously, with McConnell and Trump over the issue of whether or not we're actually going to provide help to people who are in need because of the coronavirus. So I am here fighting to make sure that we have the resources that go back to the cities and towns for schools, for public safety, for food, for health. We have to make sure that funding is there. Otherwise, we are going to have a complete catastrophe in our country. We are looking at a president who is a racist and criminally negligent at the same time. The mismanagement of the coronavirus is absolutely devastating to our country. He is the most anti-science president of all time, and it is to the detriment of the health of people in our country. So I am down here right now fighting to make sure we get at least $1 trillion for the cities and towns, at least $175 billion to go to the schools. It's not a question of a date the schools open, but whether or not the data will support it. But you need the testing. You need the contact tracing. You need the personal protective equipment. You need the resources that are going into the community to make sure they can deal with this problem. So without question, we are at a turning point. We have a president who is no longer dog whistling his racist policies. He now just says it flat out. And what we're seeing in Portland, Oregon, and he's predicting Chicago and Detroit and Baltimore and other cities, and perhaps Boston to follow, we'll have him basically saying that he has to send in the federal marshals, the federal troops in order to protect our cities. And we can see what happens in Portland, Oregon. It's just pouring oil onto a fire. And that is his intention. It is racist in intent. And we have to fight him in the same way that I have introduced with Elizabeth Warren, the legislation to repeal the qualified immunity, which police officers receive even when there is a murder of an innocent person like George Floyd or others across our country. We have to make sure that we put those protections in place. Ayanna has introduced the counterpart legislation in the United States House of Representatives. And with Cory Booker, I have introduced the Next Step Act, which just looks at our criminal justice system, top to bottom, does away with the atrocious mandatory minimums, does away with the distinction between crack cocaine and powdered cocaine, which is an 18-to-1 differential, because we need justice in our criminal system, justice in our healthcare system, our economic system, into our educational system. We need justice. That has to be the agenda for the United States of America now and into 2021 and 2022 and beyond. That is what we must be fighting for. And I will add this. It's why I introduced the Green New Deal with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because we need environmental justice as well. Black and brown families breathe different air than white families breathe. We can see that over in Chelsea, Brockton, Lawrence, Boston. We can see that they're more vulnerable to the coronavirus because of the pre-existing asthmas, other respiratory illnesses which they have. My wife is a public health doctor. She was Assistant Surgeon General of the United States. This is basically prevention 101. The Green New Deal will reduce the amount of pollutants that are up in the atmosphere. And it is essential that we provide the leadership on that. I'm from Malden. My father drove a truck for the Hood Milk Company. I drove an ice cream truck to work my way through BC and BC Law School. I know that families right now need help. And I have always fought for those families, and I will continue to fight for those families on the floor of the United States Senate. But we have to make sure that it's done ultimately with justice and justice for all. So thank you, Jonathan, so much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to join you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And so folks, feel free to put questions that you have in the chat. I still see one from Will Glinmeyer noting, hi, Senator, the White House has shifted policy recently to promote the wearing of masks and more aggressive social distancing. In your view, are they going to take COVID-19 more seriously, or is it just the result of falling poll numbers?
It's just a result of poll numbers. Right now, the Republican members of the Senate and House are increasingly petrified that there is a political landslide that is heading their way. Donald Trump is someone who right now has set up a circumstance where we are battling in the final 2 weeks of July for whether or not we're going to provide help to ordinary families in our country. And by the way, Tony Fauci is a scientist who Trump has been discrediting for the last month because Tony Fauci is telling the truth. And I'll say this, he's got a science advisor, the president. Who is that science advisor? He's or she is in a witness protection program, because we know that whether it's climate change or it is coronavirus, we have the denier in chief sitting in the Oval Office. And on masks, in my opinion, it will be completely driven ultimately by those governors in the southern states who realize that they continue to follow lemming-like Donald Trump at their own political peril. And that is what will change the policy. But unfortunately, it will be after too many lives have been lost.
And then I have a question from Jim Berkman, who's asking about kind of addressing kind of the kind of overwhelming amount of private money that gets spent in our elections. And I'll kind of tag that on to, if Democrats do end up being so lucky as to have the White House, the Senate, and the House next year, what would you want to see the party do to help control like the outsized roll of money in our electoral system?
Okay, no, that's a great question. From my perspective, Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission is one of the worst decisions in the history of the United States. And we need one to win so that President Biden gets to name the next set of Supreme Court justices, and then we can bring up from below the cases that can then be tried before the Supreme Court so that they can make decisions that begin to put a limitation on this just vast amount of money which has come into our system, and much of it undisclosed, unlimited. We shouldn't have any money that's in our political system that is not disclosed, that is not completely clear who is making that contribution. And that, sadly, is not the United States of America today.
Okay, and then do you see any movement for I'm going to follow up there. Do you see any movement for like increasing the public funding of elections?
Well, that was one of the first handful of bills which I introduced when I arrived in the United States Congress. My hope is that we could ultimately move to public financing of campaigns. That is the best way to ensure that the voices of ordinary people are heard in our country. And that is something that I still believe should happen in our country.
Thank you. So two questions in from Margaret McKenna, who's asking, at the end of your next term, you will be 79. Would you run again?
Well, I think, thank you for that question. So there's I guess there's a premise built into that I just won the election I'm in right now. And I think I will address the question with a little bit of humility and just say that 6 weeks from tonight, my hope is that I can win the primary and then go on in November and win that election. And beyond that, I don't think I should be making any comments because it will have assumed that I have already won. And I want everyone out there right now working as hard as they can to make sure that we actually secure a victory on primary night.
Then I see from Hussein, what is the chance to get the kind of $600 extra in unemployment aid extended and kind of the extension of other type of federal aid that's passed in recent months? Because I know there's talk of another package coming up soon.
Yeah, well, Mitch McConnell, Republicans, they absolutely do not want to provide additional unemployment benefits. We're here in Massachusetts. We have the highest unemployment rate in the country, 17.4%. Families are desperate, and they're going to grow more desperate. This is an economic crisis unlike anything going back to the Great Depression. So Democrats are going to fight. I'm going to fight tooth and nail over the next 10 days in the Senate to make sure that we extend that $600 benefit for everyone in our country. It's absolutely the lifeline so that people can pay their mortgages, their rent, food, medicine. It is absolutely imperative that we win this fight. The Republicans backed down earlier. They only wanted $100 billion for hospitals. We made it $150 billion. They actually didn't want any money for testing, none. And we had to fight them, and we beat them. So we got to $25 billion for testing, which is now coming out of the federal system down into the states. And we're going to do the same thing with this unemployment benefit. We're going to hold the line. We are going to fight to make sure that people get that $600 because this pandemic and economic crisis is not going away soon. And families, unfortunately, will be historically harmed if the federal government does not provide the assistance.
Any other questions in the chat that people want to ask? Okay, from David, how can we see real oversight and accountability of the Trump administration in a divided Congress, specifically with respect to COVID-19?
Well, that's an excellent question. And again, over in the Senate, we are standing up and fighting to make sure that we get all of the information which the American people deserve. But unfortunately, this is an administration that is just as closed as any in the history of our country, the most closed. So we're going to fight. We're going to fight hard to get the information out. The only way to really win this is to fumigate the White House on November 4th, just to get rid of this man and to focus on this incredible opportunity we have to win the United States Senate, to add seats in the United States House of Representatives, and in January to have our FDR moment, to have our moment where in healthcare, in childcare, in sick leave, in ensuring people get the incomes which they need, that we are able to have the votes to be able to change this country, to deliver on the promise of what this generation must do for our country. So from my perspective, we just have to go out there and organize, not agonize, to get up and fight and do everything we can to win this election. That's what I'm committed to doing, and making sure that everyone gets the protection they need, because we're watching an administration give a backdoor pardon to General Flynn, to take care of all of his buddies up and down, Roger Stone, you name it, a complete and total daily abuse of power. It's not one issue, it's every issue. He thinks that he is a king and not a president. And we just have to commit ourselves to making sure that Massachusetts is the leader in removing him.
So quickly following up, and this will be the last question because I know you have to get over to Ward 5. I saw Carol Lasky asking about how worried are you about whether or not Trump will accept the results of the election in November?
I am petrified that he will not accept the results of this election. We might wind up in a situation where Gore versus Bush looks like it was tame compared to what could confront us, especially given the fact that there is going to be a high percentage of votes across our country that are cast by absentee ballots. So that's why we need to fund all of the election security preparations on election day, but actually heading up into election day, because the election actually will begin a month before. That's when the voting will be put in place. And then to have all of the funding necessary, all the legal talent on election day and for in-person voting, and then for the day or weeks that will ensue after that, to make sure that this president does not attempt to steal this election by a 5-4 vote in the United States Supreme Court, and you know that's where it's heading. And we're about to, we're going to have a showdown because we're going to win this election. We're going to win Pennsylvania. We're going to win Wisconsin. We're going to win Michigan. And he is going to contest each and every one of those states. And we just have to put the resources in to protect against that historic corruption of democracy.
Willie was telling from your team was telling me that you have to kind of transition over to get to Ward 5 because I think that you're on their agenda at 7:20. But I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you to everyone in Ward 4. I ask for your endorsement. I've worked very, very hard over the years in order to make sure that I represent the highest aspirations for our state. If you have my back on primary day, I will have your back for the next 6 years on the floor of the United States Senate. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you to Ward 4 Democrats.
Well, thank you so much. And then I'll invite up Congressman Joe Kennedy, who just joined. 5-minute opening pitch, and then we'll go to some time for questions.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for having me. Better. Thank you guys so much for having me. Thanks for the opportunity. Hope you are well. And just so everybody's aware, I am not driving a car. But really thrilled and honored to be with you. I look forward to giving you a quick picture and then answering as many questions as we possibly can. And look, I got in this race from the very beginning because I believe that we need stronger leadership in the Senate. Because I believe that we, across our Commonwealth, across our country, are capable of so much more, that our normal is broken. And normal was a country where an essential worker couldn't earn a living wage. It was a country where 130,000 of our fellow Americans have died because of a novel virus. It's a country that let George Floyd die. And it is a country where, for far too long, politicians thought that they could legislate from Washington, telling people back home what was best for them, rather than coming home and listening to their constituents, asking what's on their mind, and addressing those concerns through their policies. And you know what? That just doesn't work. It's the politics of the past. And if it did work, we would not be where we are right now. And so we have a chance to build something better, to ensure that voices are actually seen and heard, so that we don't make those big mistakes that take place when you don't have legislators that are connected. Votes like supporting the Iraq War, votes like supporting mass incarceration, votes like voting for the Patriot Act and NAFTA. That's what's at stake in this election. Not just the question of politics and labels, because I think both Senator Markey and I are progressive Democrats, and I think most voters across Massachusetts actually know that. But what is at stake is the very definition of what we expect out of a legislator today, out of a senator today, and whether we're going to have leaders that are willing to do the hard work, to take on the big changes that are necessary, to elevate the voices that have been for far too long deliberately cut out and denied a seat at that table. I'm proud of my record, I'm proud of my work, and I look forward to earning your help and support, and I hope to have your vote on September 1st. And thanks very much. Let's get to it.
Okay, just had to unmute myself. So questions in the chat. Okay. I see a question from I'm going up to a few so I can see where they start. I see a question from Hussein asking, how do you plan to address the social unrest, and what would you do differently in terms of concerns for the communities of color?
So yeah, sorry, there you go. Phone got screwy. So I think a number of ways we have to address the social unrest. One is you actually got to be present. You got to be here. You got to be listening to leaders in our community, making sure that they have a seat at the table, that their voices can be heard, and that they know that you are fighting for them down in Washington, D.C. And look, I've been proud of my record over the course of the past 8 years or so in Washington, D.C. for how I've allowed those voices in Washington, voices in the district, and promoted those voices in the district to inform my policies down in Washington. The first bills that I passed through Congress, a Republican-led Congress, were around expanding academic opportunities, educational opportunities to women, minorities, and low-income families through STEM education. The main first big bill I passed around revitalizing our American manufacturing and advanced manufacturing was driven by the concerns in my district, from Attleboro to Taunton to Fall River. The seminal anti-discrimination bill that we have before Congress today, the Do No Harm Act, to try to directly target the rights move on religious freedom and recalibrate that back to ensure that civil rights cannot be infringed because of somebody else's religion. That's my bill. It's endorsed by over 50 civil rights organizations around the country. So the record that I have, mental behavioral health care, being one of my biggest priorities in Congress, informed by my time understanding the deep structural inequities of the way we treat mental health care, which is we lock people up and we put them in jail. The largest providers of mental behavioral health care in our country are the jails in LA and Chicago. 80 to 90% of the people suffering from or sitting behind bars in our jails in Massachusetts are suffering from substance use disorder or mental illness. These are the issues that I've worked on. These are the issues that I will continue to address. And I'm proud of the way in which I've tried to elevate those voices across my time in Congress.
Great. I see a few additional questions from Shayna Auberg. What is your position on qualified immunity?
And we need to end it.
That's quick. And see
and by the way, just to put a point on that, voted for it.
It's a good answer.
But also already voted for it in the Justice and Policing Act, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that came out of the House. So just so folks know.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice. And then I see from Ryan says, thank you for joining us, Congressman. Can you name 3 positions where you feel you are more progressive than the senator?
Yeah, absolutely. So literally on issues of war and peace, and granted, I wasn't in Congress, but the senator voted for the Iraq War, and that's the biggest foreign policy blunder in recent American history. I'll put my record up in terms of trying to fight for a coherent foreign policy that does not get into wars in the Middle East, up against the senators any day of the week. Taking on the structural challenges in our country to demand a politics that actually promotes progressive voices. I've been for trying to keep super PAC money out of this race. The senator ran on that People's Pledge back in 2013. He has flipped his position. He has a 501c4 coming in and dumping money into this race. The donors behind that C4, no one has any idea who they are. He's got supporters, billionaire supporters that have dumped hundreds of thousands of dollars into this race that are from venture capital funds and telecom type. And I think you can't selectively say, hey, when dark money can come in and when it can't, if you're trying to get dark money out. I was the first candidate in this race to call for abolishing the filibuster. Why? Because if we actually want to pass things like the Green New Deal, and yes, I was an original co-sponsor, and yes, I have a higher lifetime rating with the League of Conservation Voters than Ed Markey does. So I am proud of my environmental record here. But if you're going to actually deliver on those promises, you cannot do it by keeping a filibuster around. You can't. And by the way, I came out for legalizing marijuana about a year before Senator Markey did. So there's a whole bunch of areas here where I actually am markedly more progressive than the senator, and I stand by that record.
To follow up on one of those, do you see any war and peace contrast? So like during the period in which you both served in your kind of your current capacities of looking at like 2013 to the present, do you see any war and peace contrasts to that point?
So, absolutely. Senator Markey, when the Obama administration tried to gain support for invading Syria to go after chemical weapons, Senator Markey was the one member of the United States Senate to vote present on that request, the only one. And I think the lesson of the Iraq War is you do not go into another Middle Eastern country without a plan as to what success looks like, how long is it going to take, and how long you're going to stay there. Because that same authorization for the use of military force that Senator Markey voted on over 20 years ago, or roughly 20 years ago, 18 years ago, is still being used to allow for military engagement today. It was that authorization that Donald Trump rested on to take out General Soleimani, an Iranian general, 18 years later, which is why you do not pass an authorization for the use of military force without a sunset clause. And that's not me saying that now with the benefit of hindsight. There's plenty of people that were talking about that back then. Why? Because you don't give a blank check to George Bush to go in and run roughshod over whatever country he wants to run roughshod over.
So just as a point of clarification, the reason he was the only, it never actually got to the floor in the Senate. It was a vote in the Foreign Relations Committee with the present vote, and it did never come up for a vote in the House. So
no, it never came up for the vote in the House. Yes.
Most representatives did actually not have a stated public position, either affirmative or negative on it.
Right. So fair.
Yeah.
That being said, he was the only person on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that voted present. And I don't think present is a coherent choice when being presented with the question of what do you have to do to solve this problem? Look, this is granted the question of sending in military troops to try to neutralize chemical weapons stockpiles is a very difficult question. There are good people on that voted yes and people that voted no, but you have to take a position. And the senator decided that the position that he wanted to take was present. And I don't think that there's any defense for when you are called upon to make a decision that present is the right one. And I'm telling you that my position on it is that you do not go into, I questioned that, just Jonathan, that vote was getting scheduled to come up before us because in the Senate, when first the House was supposed to come, we had those briefings. I pushed back on the Obama administration extremely hard. Tony Blinken directly, what does success look like? How long is it going to take? And what burden are you asking to put on our men and women in uniform? And we didn't get good answers, right? You just didn't. And so I don't know if you were here for Iraq, how you possibly sit there and say the right thing to do is to send more troops in. And granted, he didn't say that, but he said present. And I think that arguably is even worse.
So I'm seeing other questions from Will Glenmeyer. It says, hi, Congressman, what will you be able to accomplish as a senator that you could not as a representative?
Oh, great question, Will. So look, I think the difference here between what I believe is at stake in the United States Senate versus the House of Representatives, that the Senate gives the holders of that position an enormous opportunity to address not just the causes that we care about, like again, for me, mental health, healthcare equity, civil rights, legal services, and a big cornerstone of much of my work around economic dignity that I don't think is being sufficiently addressed in the Senate. But also critically, the idea that there's far more to being a senator than just the votes that you cast and the bills that you file. And with due respect, Senator Markey's, much of his argument here is, look, I filed the right bill, I voted the right way, I passed some legislation, and that's great. I'm not denying the fact that over nearly 50 years in office, he's passed bills, and he's made an important contribution. I've acknowledged that a number of times. But the point is that there's so much more to being a senator, particularly from Massachusetts now. And that comes with, I think, presence, judgment, and vision. And the critical part about that is about presence. Yes, I think Senator Markey needs to be back home in Massachusetts more. But the point on that is that because given the challenges that we confront, again, a central lesson of this time is that our policies, as perhaps as well-intentioned as they may be from Washington, they are not addressing the concerns of our community. We're seeing this pour out in our streets all across the country. You have to be connected to our communities in order to make sure that you're giving voice to those concerns. And I don't think he's done that enough. When it comes to vision, it is not enough to sit there and say that I voted against all of Donald Trump's judges if you did not do anything to actually take the power from Mitch McConnell. Because of course, McConnell was going to end the filibuster for judges and the Supreme Court. And after that's already done, there's nothing you can do about it. I was in nearly 20 states in the election cycle in 2018, campaigning for dozens of other candidates, because I knew that we had to flip the House to hold this administration accountable. And if you could do that, you could pass things like background checks for guns and gun violence curbs. You could pass things like the Paycheck Fairness Act and the Equality Act and HR 1 to get rid of gerrymandering and and overhaul public finance, campaign finance law, and dozens of other bills. I was in nearly 20 states. Senator Markey was in zero, not a single one. Say, okay, you're not campaigning for other people. You're not legislating because both Senator Markey passed some bills during that time frame. So did I, right? But Republicans had the House, Senate, and presidency. They were busy trying to take healthcare away from 30 million people and pass a massive tax cut to the wealthy. This wasn't a time for progressive legislating. But if you're not, during that time frame, then if you're a United States senator and you're not able to pass meaningful and significant legislation, and you're also not campaigning to actually take back the levers of power so that we can deliver on that change, and you're not at home, because he wasn't. You ask people around Western Massachusetts or Central Massachusetts or really anywhere, and they'll tell you that they didn't see it. But if you're not doing any of those things, then I'm sorry, you're not doing the job the way that we need you to, because this is mission critical. Republicans are driving their vision of, they confirmed 2 Supreme Court justices that they shouldn't have had. So do something about it. You're a US Senator. And what do I think I can do? I think I can do something about it. And I think I've done something about it in the House, but I think if I can do it in the House as a junior member, I'd been in office for 3 terms. Senator Markey had been in office for 45 years. He was a chairman of a committee. You can't tell me that I could do that much more than our current senator, and either one, that he shouldn't have been doing more, or two, that I can't then do more than him. And I think the reason why that's important is because Massachusetts has this opportunity to help drive these policies forward. And the last piece about presence, it wasn't like those policies back in 2018, that was a clear sailing year for us. That was the year that Yes on 3 campaign happened. Why? Because conservatives were trying to use Massachusetts as an example to pull back transgender protections that we fought for and pushed through back the year before. I testified before the State House to push those to push that legislation through. I called legislators there to try to push that legislation through. We did get that legislation through to protect protect transgender citizens here in Massachusetts. And then I helped lead that fight on the Yes on 3 campaign. And a lot of others did too. Senator Markey didn't. I testified before the State House on automatic voter registration. Why? Because Massachusetts should lead the way when it comes to voting rights. And we don't. I helped lead the way in right now, leading the push for a vote by mail and early vote. Senator Markey supported it, didn't push for it. There is no excuse why Massachusetts should be playing second fiddle here on these issues to anybody. But that's the job. That's what you sign up for. And I think there's so much more to do than the way that Senator Markey is defined.
So I wanted to get to the other quick questions. I'm going to do one that I think is somewhat quick now, and then I'm going to get to the other 3 that I see here afterwards. So one, what committee in the Senate would be on the top of your short list to serve and why?
So the one that I would love to get on is the Health Committee, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Healthcare, as I said, has been a huge priority of mine. It is going to be a huge priority of mine. Labor, pensions, the economic dignity that I talk about, and that I've done an awful lot of work on. Obviously, a lot of that comes through there as well. And then education is a big deal. So that's where I would love to go. I, much like my current position in energy and commerce, they don't give that normally right away to you. So you got to earn your way there. But that's where I would love to end up being one of, a couple others.
Okay. And since we have a few minutes left, I thought for efficiency's sake, I'll bundle the last few few questions that I see, and so you can answer them.
Thank you.
In order. Okay, so from Harold Brogan, I see both you and Senator Markey have common philosophic and politically progressive ideologies. Are there any major differences? And if not, why would kind of not having would not a senator with more seniority be an advantage for the citizens of Massachusetts? Let me go down. I have one from Margaret. Let me find Margaret's, which is about, I scrolled 2 packs, but it was talking about how you and Catherine Clark had done work electing candidates around the country in 2018, and to talk about about how the 2 of you ended up doing it. And then a question I see from Stephanie Shapiro-Berkson asking about why that you had endorsed against Rachael Rolins and Ayanna Pressley in the 2018 primary.
Great. So first one with regards to seniority. Great question. Not the case. So I actually have more seniority in the House than Senator Markey does in the Senate. When you switch chambers, the seniority goes to 0. So Senator Markey was actually one of the, I'm going to say, top 10 most senior members of the House of Representatives. He would currently be, had he stayed in the House, he'd be currently, in all likelihood, chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, one of the most powerful members in the House of Representatives. And Massachusetts would have the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Energy Commerce Committee, and Rules Committee, 3 of the most powerful positions in Congress, period. He moved over to the Senate, but he moved over to the Senate special election in June-ish anyway, of 2013, and he became the 100th senator. So he actually has less seniority in the Senate than I do in the House. And so, yes, I've been in the House for, now I'm completing my 4th term. That is some level of, that's a medium, amount of seniority. But for folks that would say, okay, we'll sit there and stay and become chairman of Energy and Commerce, I'd point out the fact that Senator Markey stayed for 37 years and was still second in line. So it's not like that is a future for me that is imminent. I don't put it that way. And Jonathan, what was the second question?
So there was that question.
Other candidates. Other candidates.
Campaigning.
Yes, other candidates. So we in Massachusetts recognize that that the 2016 to 18 election cycle was going to be an absolutely critical election cycle for Democrats to ensure that we could take back to make sure that we had some level of accountability on this administration, that we needed to provide some oversight, particularly after what we saw Republicans having no desire to do so, and that we needed to be able to win back the House to set up our chance to do a couple things. One, win the presidency. Two, hopefully win back the Senate. And third, given what Republicans did with regards to in this election cycle 10 years ago, so the election cycle that coincides with the US Census, where they flipped so many state houses around the country that ended up leading to gerrymandered congressional districts for 10 years, that this election cycle is one of the most critical ones that you will get every 10 years, an absolutely critical one that sets the framework for the House of Representatives for 10 years to come. And if we could win last cycle, it sets us up on a foundational platform to actually sustain those gains and build on them this cycle, which gives us a chance to actually have fairer lines and a more democratic little d electorate or political system for the 10 years to come. And so I joined with Catherine Clark and Chairman Neal and now Chairman McGovern to one, help raise resources for folks in Massachusetts, but then two, I just traveled around the country. And that effort was mine, just wherever we could go. I was in West Virginia and the Rio Grande Valley and Arizona and Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Indiana, and wherever we could go. And candidly, Jonathan, we lost a lot of those races, but I think it's critically important that if we were going to reclaim the House, we had to reclaim districts that Donald Trump won. And you had to go in there and make the case. And some good folks, great folks ran, some folks lost, some folks won. And I hope to be able to, sorry, somebody just called me. Can you guys see me? Yeah. I hope to be able to have the chance to continue to do that should I be able to serve in the Senate. Last one was Ayanna and Rachael, Congresswoman Presley and the District Attorney Rolins. Look, first off, in the race with Congresswoman Presley, I've known the Congresswoman for a long time. That was a very tough race. Mike Capuano had been a colleague and mentor to me since I came into office. Ayanna's, the Congresswoman's first job in politics was actually for my father. I thought the world of her. It was a tough choice. You know, I never doubted that Ayanna would be the rock star that she is. With regards to District Attorney Rolins, I actually didn't endorse in that race. And that was tough. I've got a good friend that I went to school with for 12 years that was running that race, but I did not endorse in that race. All right.
I'm muted. We are at time for this. So I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening. And have fun at Ward 5 because I know you're heading over there.
I'm heading over there right now. Thank you. See you guys.
We're like back to back. We're close physically in space, although everything's remote right now.
Thanks so much, guys. Take care.
Thank you. Okay, so everybody, that we have some kind of just general business to do, and then we'll do voting kind of at the end of this. So on membership, I know that there are 3 people that I've seen here who would be eligible to be voted as associate members if they want to be. That would be Jim Berkman, Susie McGlone, and Marie Huta. If you're interested in being voted in as an associate member, we would be happy to have you. Just unmute yourself, quickly say who you are, and we could do that quickly.
Hi, shall I go first?
Sure.